Hey guys, this is as much volume as we've got, so I'm going to ask you to, ironically, quiet down. First of all, I want to say congratulations. The ordinance has been withdrawn. But it is not formally withdrawn before it's withdrawn before the full council. We're hoping that that's happening on Thursday. Keep an eye on it. Come up. I want to thank you all for coming out. The logistics today are a little different than what you've got on the card. We've got voter registration cards over here. You should sign up if you're not signed up. You can take them right inside and register to vote. We're going to do some speakers, people who are going to speak inside council chambers, and then have some music, and then we're headed over to Kermit's Treme Speakeasy for an after party. I want to say thank you to Jeremy Thompson and Heidi Deichelman, who've put in a crazy amount of work over the past week, pulling this off. I want to say thank you to Carol Kalinicek, who's helped to organize legal observers today, to Cafe Istanbul, Bank Street Bar, and Gasa Gasa for offering to host watching parties, and to Ethan Ellisad, Patrick Crilly, Ryan Williams, Thomas Adams, and Hannah Krieger Benson for putting in more work on these issues than I thought possible. You guys are an incredible team, and I'm honored to work with you. We did an incredible thing here today. We pushed back a culture-killing ordinance. We pushed back an economy-killing ordinance. We pushed back against the city council and one of the most powerful lobbying groups in our city, which is cleverly disguised as a neighborhood association.
Right. Yeah.
But it's more than pushing back an ordinance. VC Pora thought they could write the law and keep it a secret. They thought no one would notice or care that their neighborhood coalition was a fake, and they thought that because it's always been true. The city council thought they could push an ordinance through under the cover of Christmas and throw out years of community input and their own commission study, and they thought that because it's always been true. New Orleans uses its musicians and culture bearers, its venues and cultural workers. They use us to drive the economy, to draw new talent to the city, and to provide the soundtrack of political rallies and marketing campaigns. But they treat the people who make the culture like second-class citizens. And they've gotten away with it forever. They assumed we weren't paying attention, and that a one-day rally is all that we're capable of. And sometimes that has been true, but it isn't true anymore. I'd like to introduce Hannah Krieger Benson, spokeswoman for the Music and Culture Coalition of New Orleans.
Good morning.
Morning.
I will do my best to speak up. If you can't hear me, please feel free to move closer if you would like. So first of all, I would like to just say a little bit about what the Music and Culture Coalition of New Orleans is. What is MACNO? About 16 months ago, Kermit Ruffins called a meeting at his speakeasy on Basin Street, and close to 100 people, I think, showed up to express frustration over some beloved music venues which had been closed down over the summer of 2000, the live music had been closed down over the summer of 2012. That was on a Wednesday. The meetings then continued on Wednesdays from that point, and within a couple of months, it became clear that the amount of work that needed to be done around culture and law was so vast that this coalition began to take shape. And MACNO acts to bridge the gap between legal and policy information and the music and culture people who can be directly affected by law and policy, but who very often don't have a seat at the table to discuss that kind of law and policy. So then, this specific noise ordinance issue, on December 19th, it was introduced. I've been told to talk louder. I will try. On December 19th, a noise ordinance was introduced for first read here at City Hall, and it was a noise ordinance that was deeply, deeply troubling, both in the process by which it was written and also the content that it contained. And the problems with the process, the problems with the process, as Sue mentioned, were that it was brought up the week of Christmas. It was written ignoring a lot of citizen input and ignoring the city commissioned sound scientist report, and it was written very closely tailored to the interests of a very small group of wealthy, powerful citizens who wanted to shape certain parts of the city in their own vision and thought that they could do it using law. Luckily, as we've already discussed, we were able to stop that. The content of the law that was troubling specifically, most troubling was three things. Decibel levels, which applied just to the French Quarter, and then measurement rubric, and measurement placement, which applied to the entire city. And there are different ways of measuring sound, and the new ordinance.
70 decibels now.
Oh, I'm sorry, is that too loud?
Please whisper.
So the measurement rubric and the place from which contested sound would be measured would be changed under this new draft ordinance, and that was for the entire city, and that was written in ways that would have had unintended consequences and are just not okay. One of the important pieces of this, which has not been discussed as much as it should be, is enforcement. Enforcement is a long-running problem in sound issues. It has historically been inconsistent and often lacking. Cultural practices grow in the absence of enforcement, and then if it is suddenly invoked, they can be crushed or be sort of chilled out of existence. This draft law was clearly written under the assumption that no change would happen in enforcement protocol, while in reality there's efforts being made right now to change enforcement. There is a sound office which was recently created by a proclamation from the city council, and they've said that they're going to make that, and that would be specifically in existence to deal with issues of sound. It would take sound enforcement issues away from the NOPD because they have much bigger things to deal with.
Yes.
Yes. And
like murder and rape,
for example. And it would give this office would be then designated to be able to deal with sound and shared space in a nuanced and fair way. Pushing this law through under the lack of current enforcement would not have solved any problems. It would simply have become a hammer to be used against any cultural businesses that behaved in ways that the people who wrote it did not like. Throughout Macno's work, we have often seen these issues around regulation framed in the press and in our opponents' statements as a conflict between musicians and residents. And that is not right. That framing works on the assumption that resident equals upstanding citizen and musician equals rabble, disturbing quality of life. And it raises a really fundamental question of who gets to judge or decide or dictate what is good and bad in our shared urban landscape. We live here, we work here, we are the residents! A few months ago, I was in a meeting with one of Stuart Smith's staff, and I had to tell him, finally, that he could not monopolize the word reasonable, and that saying reasonable did not make the content of what he was saying reasonable. It is not reasonable for the whims of a handful of people to shape the culture and cultural economy of New Orleans, when 6 million people come here each year to take part in that culture and provide a huge part of New Orleans' economy. It is not reasonable to create laws that make everyone a criminal when you claim that your goal is to address a few bad operators, and it is even less reasonable to have those laws shaped by the people who profit from every lawsuit and fine. It is not reasonable that laws we all have to live by are written in secret meetings and through sham neighborhood coalitions. Macno is asking our city's leaders for what is reasonable: transparency and inclusion. And we're going to keep asking for transparency and inclusion because there's a lot more work to be done at the intersection of culture and policy. We have zoning that has as the default that music is prohibited wherever it is not specifically allowed. We have venues being bullied into signing good neighbor agreements that make it too hard to do business. We have street musicians banned from playing during the hours when the most people are on the streets. And we have a city that profits hugely for music and culture, while musicians and culture bearers make barely enough money to survive.
Right.
We as MACNO are not asking for an unregulated city. We're asking for policies that approach our culture as an engine of economic growth as well as a valuable part of our collective identity. We're asking for policies that reflect our city and that honor the importance of our culture and our heritage. As the noise ordinance is reworked, we want to see an honest process that includes 1/3 authentic broad neighborhood representation, 1/3 culture and tourism businesses, and 1/3 musicians and culture bearers. We want laws that are informed by science and common sense. We're here today celebrating a victory, but pushing back against this noise ordinance is just the beginning. In New Orleans, music and culture need a seat at the table, and the city council is just going to have to find a bigger table.
Yes.
Hey, Sue! Here she comes.
We're now going to have some other speakers.
Chuck Perkins from Cafe Istanbul. We're happy to see everybody here today. And I just want to say, unfortunately, the more things change, the more they remain the same. If you go and read the book Up From the Cradle of Jazz, early on when they start talking about the drumming that happened in Congo Square over 250 years ago, they talk about how it made people nervous, how they got scared hearing the sounds of those drums. You understand? Well, it's 250 years later and they still scared hearing the sounds of those drums. Now, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I realize right where we standing right now, a lot of these big buildings you see around here, they used to have the name of oil companies on them, right? But you know what the problem was? The oil was in the ground. It wasn't anything you had to really work for, so you didn't have to think about it. And our political leaders thought that it would always be there. And now when we look up, we don't see those names no more because they're in Houston, Texas, you understand? And it's the same thing with the music. The city has always benefited from music, but they never had to pay attention to it, right? So most of the people in this building right here, they don't understand what makes it tick. You understand? They go to other cities and look for best practices. Well, when you do that, you're gonna miss music because other cities don't have music like we have.
No. Hey.
Okay, so I just opened a club, Cafe Istanbul. We've been in business now almost 3 years. I ain't rich by no stretch of the imagination. In fact, if somebody asked me for $10 right now, I ain't got it. So anyway, I had to go out and get a loan. I had to go out and get a loan, $175,000. I spoke to an attorney. The attorney said, your building on the corner of St. Claude and St. Roch, 2372 St. Claude, your building is zoned for music. The attorney said that. In addition to talking to the attorney, we talked to the guy right here, Mr. Ed Horan, in zoning and permits. He said, you are already zoned for music, okay? I spent $175,000 that I don't have. And after I spend the money, it's like, wait a second. Maybe it says this, but that's not really what it means. So you're gonna have to come and talk to us, right? So now I'm down $175,000. As far as I'm concerned, I got a gun to my head now. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna have to do this, and this. And if you agree to do that, you know, we'll let you open your business.
Yeah, that ain't right.
So what the hell I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say, no, I don't wanna do it, and just be down 175?
Right.
So I sign off on the thing, right? Now, I can show you the proviso right now. You're not gonna believe this. In New Orleans, in a city of music, I got a proviso that say I can't have live music more than 4 days a week.
What's that?
It says that in the proviso, I can't have live music more than 4 days a week. Now, the other thing is, I have to close at 2 a.m. Okay, cool, I close at 2 a.m. But then the same neighbors who put the pressure on me to close at 2 a.m., when I got a club full of people, right, and tell them they gotta leave at 2 o'clock, then the neighbor's mad because 200 people leave at the same time. It's like, really? Now here's the other thing that's utterly ridiculous, right? The people leave my club in their bars all around. They walk 1 block away, 1 block this way, 2 blocks that way, 3 blocks that, and go to other bars. You understand what I'm saying? And so the 2 things that I found really unfortunate. Number 1 is that 1 or 2 neighbors sending emails. I come to work every day. I come back in the morning and I dread opening my emails because I'm gonna get a whole lot of nasty stuff from them, from City Hall. And I didn't feel like if the idea I had of owning a business in this country, I felt like I must be in some foreign place with people where I have absolutely no rights, and that any day somebody could just come and tell me that they're gonna close my business now. The other thing that I'm sad to say is that going through this whole process has reaffirmed something that I already knew. And that is, if you're like me, if you're just like a person trying to scratch some nickels together to get your business started, forget about it. Forget about it. If you got a lot of money, and it's not like they just gonna give it to the guy with the money, but when they see the guy with the money and he can afford the attorneys, he got like some deep pockets and he's gonna fight with them, guess what? They're gonna give him what he wants, right? But if you're just an average Joe trying to carve out your little niche, trying to make a life for yourself, forget about it. It's not gonna happen for you because if you ain't got deep enough pockets to have to fight through all of this, it won't happen. And I'm sorry to say that for y'all, but I'm glad y'all are here today. Peace, love y'all.
Exactly.
Sue told me to come up and speak, so I'm gonna try to keep my what I have to say brief. Originally, about 5 years ago, 5 of me and my close friends moved down from the Midwest, and we were living in Dayton, Ohio. I'm from Chicagoland originally, Harvey, Illinois, to be exact. Upon moving, my hopes was to be able to provide a life for myself and my children and do what I always had my heart to do, playing music. For me, moving down here, I remember some of my first experiences with New Orleans music was hearing the Hot 8 Brass Band when I was living in Dayton, Ohio. And that was a thing that sent chills up my spine. See, me not being from Louisiana or from New Orleans, the music to me means a lot because here in New Orleans, this is the only place in the world where musicians are born and cultivated from birth, playing on the street. Have you minded? Louis Armstrong, from Louis Armstrong to Wynton Marsalis to Trombone Shorty to Fats Domino to all of the greats. If it wasn't for those people right here, we wouldn't be standing here right now as a unified people, because the music that they played brought all of us together, black, white, whatever. Right now, the city goes forth in passing this ordinance and everything. And I have to step into another category as a young African American or a young black person. For me, coming from Chicago, I knew that music was a sign of hope for me, for a career, for a future. And if they pass this noise ordinance, my biggest fear is that these little boys playing on the street, which you don't hear anymore since they didn't pass that ordinance. This is where these young brothers learn how to play and learn how to go all over the world and represent the truest form of what American culture is, and that's this music. And we must protect this music, because if we don't protect this music, we're not only risking losing our livings and livelihoods, but the youth coming up under us won't have a chance to survive as they had before. They talking about crime, more police. Instead of getting more police with this so-called mayoral race, what they need to be doing is instituting more social programs to attack the root of the problem instead of attacking the youth. So I'm just glad to see everybody out here right now, because my heart is in this music. I moved here to be a part of this community and to be a part of this music community. Anybody that don't like it, they can take their rich so and self and go on. You know what I'm saying? Because this is what music is about. Right here is about love, about us all standing out here together, playing this music, making difference in people's lives. People come here, you know what I'm saying, to get their lives changed. And nowhere else can you go all over the world. You can't go and get what you get here. The music is a part of the culture, and it's the last American frontier as far as I'm concerned, because music is freedom. And when you take away the freedom of people to play and express themselves and cultivate their ideas and their intellect, what you're doing is you're shutting down the voices of all the people that have something to say, all the people that have something in their hearts to say. So it's important, and I admonish everyone to keep fighting, because without this fight right here, we won't have what we need, and this city will go down. And just right quick, I seen them, you know, saying so the city can be more comparable to Nashville and Seattle. And so, this ain't Nashville, this ain't Seattle, and you know what, it ain't Chicago either. I moved from the Midwest so I can play my horn, and that's what I want to do. Thank y'all for coming out.
I was told to speak very loudly, so if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm not sure how a lawyer has the misfortune of following the poetic voices of Chuck Perkins and Mario Abney, but here goes. My name's Carol Kolinchak. I'm an attorney in New Orleans. For the last 21 years, I've had the privilege of representing musicians, social aid and pleasure clubs, Mardi Gras Indians, and music venues in the ongoing efforts of the city to criminalize our culture. I'm also a lover of that culture, and I moved here because of that. My 8-year-old godson was born here. He's a Katrina baby, and one of the first sentences out of his mouth was tuba, tuba. As he took his small hand and led us toward the tuba in Jackson Square, or coming out of a club on Frenchman, or at a second line in the 7th Ward. And one of his second sentences that stuck with me was, I can't wait till I'm big enough to carry a tuba. He plays the trombone now, and he looks up to so many, like Glenn David Andrews, Trombone Shorty, Corey Henry. But there are things I have to explain to him that I don't understand how to. Like when Glenn David Andrews and Derek Tabb were arrested for playing and singing I'll Fly Away at a spontaneous second line to honor their fallen friend, a tuba player. Or when the To Be Continued brass band was interrupted by sirens and police at the corner of Bourbon and Canal. He witnessed both of those, and I don't know how to explain it. And I wonder about the chilling effect that has on his dreams and the dreams of so many other young musicians. Our next Louis Armstrong, our next Trombone Shorty, our next Glenn David Andrews, our next all of you out here who play music or participate in the culture. But I'm also really worried in my role as a lawyer that works with young people about the consequences of this type of criminalization, because it's part of a larger picture. And it's taking things that are not crimes and turning them into crimes that impact people for the rest of their lives. And if you think only about a job application, a school application, even a high school application, a college application, a licensing application, a question that is on every one of them is not just, have you ever been convicted, or even have you been convicted of a felony? It's, have you ever been charged? Have you ever been arrested? And the answer to both of those under this ordinance would be yes, because this is a criminal statute. The penalties are citation, incarceration, fines. That's criminal. And the collateral consequences of that are too great. And unfortunately, because of the way it's worded, it allows for and even invites selective enforcement. And we know all too well how that works and who that will impact. And too often that is young African American males. So on both ends, it's really important to understand what this ordinance is about and what it's not. The city likes to proclaim New Orleans as the cultural capital of the world. That may be true, but it's in spite of the policies, the long history of policies that criminalize In Freddie Evans' book, Congo Square, there's a timeline that focuses mostly on Congo Square, but if you read it, what you'll see is that as far back as 1843, the city passed ordinances that prohibited music in the streets without a permit. In 1856, they passed a similar ordinance, and in 1917, at the very time that Louis Armstrong was up and coming, and this music that we so love and claim as the American music was being born, an ordinance was passed that prohibited music in parks and other areas in the streets. So this is nothing new. It's part of a long, long history. And each time it happens, I wonder about young kids like Glenn David Andrews, who so many times has talked about the impact that Tuba Fats and others of our late great musicians had on him in Jackson Square and in the streets of Treme. And how many kids are missing that opportunity today? New Orleans is the incarceration capital of the state, and Louisiana is the incarceration capital of the world. And it's because of misguided policies like this that invite selective enforcement and incarceration. If it's a public health issue, if this issue of noise is a public health issue, our musicians are the most at risk. They're the ones who are closest to this so-called noise. Treat it like that. Awareness, education, not arrest and incarceration. The city has an opportunity to get it right. There's an opportunity right now to broaden the table, as Hannah said, to make it an inclusive table that includes musicians, culture bearers, venue owners, and residents, to bring them to the table to come up with real solutions, not more statutes that incarcerate. Our young people have been waiting too long. It's time to get it right. 171 years from the first ordinance that I've seen is too long. Let's get it right. Thank you.
I was not born in New Orleans, but I got here as fast as I could. I've been playing New Orleans streets for almost 40 years. I've been playing the Jazz and Heritage Festival for 30. I was not born in New Orleans, but I got here as fast as I could. That was about 40 years ago. I've been playing the Jazz and Heritage Festival for about over 30, I'll be 31 this year, and I've already been booked. I've played all over the world. The furthest away I've been was playing the Hotel Esplanade in Melbourne, Australia. I played the Pori Jazz Festival in Finland. I played the PEN Convention in Tokyo. I play all over the world, but the only place I get arrested for making music is in New Orleans. David and I were performing on Royal Street on a Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock. The police came by, they said, "Turn off your amplifier." Okay, whatever. My rule with cops is if they tell me to do something and it's not illegal, I'm doing it. It's easier, you know? Who wants to get hassled? Turn it off. So they turned it off, but of course we had already been playing for about an hour or two, and I was all warmed up, and David was all warmed up, and we were mad. So, of course, no, we started playing loudly! And I can sing loud enough to be heard a block away without an amplifier. I really can. And so we were. And so the cops came back. They said, "We thought we told you to take that amplifier off." We said, "It is. Look, there's not connected. There's nothing to it." They said, "You just pulled it off because we saw you coming." They came up behind us. We didn't know they were coming. And it wouldn't have made any difference if we did. They just wanted us. And they had an excuse. So they took us off to jail. It took me 6 hours to get me out of jail. And I called every lawyer I knew. 3 judges signed for me to be released on my OR. It still took them 6 hours to let me out of jail. It took me another 7 to get David out.
You gotta lift the pen.
Okay? That's because his name is David Leonard, and there are lots of David Leonards in town. About 7. So they had to make sure he was not any one of the ones that might have had a reason to be in jail, right? Okay. I want you to know that being in jail is not fun. But if I have to go again in order to keep my civil rights, because music is a First Amendment speech. Yeah! We have a right to sing. Sing education. We have a right to be there. And if they don't like it, then I'll go to jail again. And I hope that all of you who will come and make sure they get out really quickly. There's so much to say. I have been before the city council here, I don't know how many times. The first time was when what's Dorothy's last name, was still, Dorothy Taylor was still on the council. And the same law that they were going to outlaw amplifiers. And so we went in, we sat down in the council meeting and we played, "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" And we did it on the amplifier, just about like that. And then we said, now that is amplified. Now let us show you unamplified music. We turned off the amps. I picked up the banjo. David picked up the trumpet. And we went, "Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in." So you can see, I don't really need a mic to sing. Of course, I couldn't sing like that all day long, but I don't really need a mic. I could be too loud without an amp. So that law is stupid. You know, think of a trumpet versus a guitar. You know, like even if we had it up with, you know, those big, well, no, if we had it up with the amps that they use at the Jazz Fest, then it would make sense, right? But when we sued the city the second time, the judge set up a, what is it that they use to keep from, to help you settle suits? What is it called? A mediator, right. He gave us a mediator. And we sat down, Mary Howell and me and several other people who were helping to support the street performers against the VC Pura, and we hammered for a month out the sound ordinance that they keep messing with. Okay? We hammered it out, and I couldn't get them to get off that stupid 8 o'clock curfew, which I think sucks. And for one thing, it's prejudicial against people who work nights and sleep days, right? Right. Anyhow, but we hammered that out. We got 80 decibels at 50 feet, and that is sufficient for just about anything, okay? They've been picking at it ever since. That was like, what, 15 years ago? And every 3 years, they come up with a whole nother bunch of stuff. And I'm serious, they do. It's every 3 years on an average, they come up with some more laws, and it's always VC Pura. You know, I don't care what they tell you about, we've got 20 organizations around the country. Yeah, one of them is an empty house. And Sue's looking at me saying, get off the stage, Rosie. So I'm going to go. But I want you to know, I thank you all for coming out here because we really need you. But don't just do that. Write letters!
Doing? Y'all feeling all right? Yeah. This is really, for me, this is really a simple thing, and I think everybody needs to know this. You don't have to ask for. You don't have to ask for what you want to do. I've been to jail for this 2-3 times. You got to demand for what's right to do. And everybody's. The biggest thing you could do right now is you can start by sending a jacket to the retirement home. And it's pretty obvious to me. I don't know if it's obvious to y'all, but Mitch Landrieu always seemed to take a picture with the brass bands, but all his policy is against the second lines and all that. So you can send Mitch back to wherever he's going. And it's, you know, it's not a political thing, but you got to really look at it. What is this about? This is about